Hello and welcome. Today we are lucky enough to have Mark Takiguchi speaking with us. Mark is an artist based in Portland, Oregon. He grew up in Chicago, Illinois, and received an MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. He lived in San Francisco from 1994 until 2012, where he taught and held staff positions at the San Francisco Art Institute and the California College of the Arts. He has created installations, participated in collaborative projects, and curated exhibitions. His art practice is currently focused on painting and drawing. He has exhibited nationally and has worked in private collections in San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Portland, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. Mark Takiguchi, welcome.
Thank you all for coming out today. I'm Mark Takiguchi. I'm going to be talking to you about paintings. I understand that this is a fairly beginning design class, so if you have questions about terminology that I use or anything, feel free to interrupt me and ask me questions that so I want to start out with just the question of what is painting? Why is painting interesting? Why do I paint? Your teacher Brian was telling me that a lot of you are really adept at manipulating images and working with digital things. And that's amazing. But it's not something that I do. I think there are specific pluses and minuses for different ways of working, so we'll get into that in a little bit. So I've been painting for over 40 years. I started probably at the age that some of you are in college. It's a process that puts me into a flow state. Does anyone know what a flow state is? What's a flow state?
It's like where you're like just super focused, but like in an enjoyable way, and just like keep going, and you're like, oh crap, like 10 hours passed. I didn't realize it.
Exactly. That's a great definition.
Yeah. It's more like for myself, when I'm writing on a wave, I don't have to put in any effort. Kindness is not constant at all. Like you said, the time to be back about.
Right.
But it's that no effort, it comes out and flows.
Natural. Well,
doing amazing.
Because I lost track. 2 weeks ago, I was like, not in the video, not always for so, well, this is really, I feel like it's
well, I mean, that's so for me, that's the pleasurable thing, right? It's kind of being in that state. And the definition of flow is that it's an activity where you're immersed in something and it provides an energizing focus. And you're fully involved and there's enjoyment of the process. So for me, painting is that flow state, the right balance of, it's still challenging, it's really difficult, I find to paint well. And so that's the right balance of challenge and engagement, like we all were saying, if you get into a flow, it feels natural, you're kind of connected to something that maybe even feels bigger than yourself. It's something really wonderful, I guess it's like meditation, have during sport, during surfing, other creative activities, but for me, painting is one activity. So there's a great quote that I like to talk about from the painter Philip Guston, who's an influence of mine, painter in the 50s and 60s, and he said, when you go into the studio, for the first few hours, especially as a painter, all these great painters in history are there in your head, kind of telling you what to do the street. You're sitting there painting and like, oh my God, Picasso is saying this, or Mondrian, or fill in the artist name. So all these artists are in your head for the first couple hours. After that, the next couple hours, it's you. It's you as the artist. You're kind of figuring it out. And then said, but that really great moment is like 4 hours or 5 hours into a painting or into a process, and it's just a painting. So you kind of like, when you talk about the flow state, you're losing this kind of sense of self-consciousness. You're kind of losing like the judgmental perspective that other artists or maybe your teachers or your friends are there, and you're doing that really great. So let's head on to the next painting up here. guys should look at stuff too. You don't have to look at me. Paintings are more interesting than me, hopefully. So I'm going to pass these out. So I want to talk a little bit about subject matter. So you'll see these are three catalog pages that have were the starting point for some of the paintings that you show here. So in relation to this show, which is called Homemaker, thank you, Ken, for thinking of me and securing my work in it. This idea of the possibilities within the home space. So the home space, the domestic space, is a place where we spend most of our time. Most of our time is our intimate relationships. It's a place of safety, but it's also a space of vulnerability. So when I started working with these interior spaces from magazines about a decade ago, I was really interested in like what the representation meant. I started out being more interested in the commercial aspect.
Oh, yeah. It's not what you think of representation. It's from editorial design. I know graphic design, there's an element to having contracting points as far as composition, and then that transition from graphic design back to studio art. Is there anything from that time period that one question is about the colors, but the other one is how has that influenced?
That's a good question. So I think some of the things that are really great that I try to keep are that sense of pattern, sense of decorative sense, which I really enjoy in the work. For the color, I sometimes pieces in the paintings will reflect the actual color from but usually I start out with a palette that I'm considering before. And those palettes I like to have contrasting colors. I want the parts of the painting to fight a little bit to create a tension or more interest. So I'm not really interested in starting out with an image and reproducing that, right? Because I think a lot of artists have done that very successfully, more successfully than I. What I'm interested in is a kind of creating a space where the representational aspects, the things you recognize, the things you understand, are in conflict or working with more abstract elements. So I'll talk a little bit later about some of my painting influences. I think you'll hopefully kind of see some of that in the work. But thank you for asking that question. So getting back to this other idea, which is what is the value of painting? And especially for young folks that haven't really had a lot of hands-on making with paints or crayons or charcoal. To me, the challenge and the benefit of painting is like understanding these histories, right? Painting is a image-making technology that's been around for 700 years. It's the 14th century, really, oil painting. Before that, the earliest records we have of artistic activity are cave, right? So it was 40, 50,000 years ago, people were painting animals and different symbology on the wall. So I think that gesture of wanting to represent your world and try to understand your world through this externalized making is something that's like deep within human consciousness and history. And so to me, painting part of that trajectory, and compared to like cave painting or drawing, it's relatively new. It's only 700 years old. But compared to digital technology, which is less than 100 years old, probably, or photography, which is about 200 years old, it's much older. And so it's actually a more difficult technology to manipulate. And anybody who's downloaded a JPEG or used some of the apps to like change your photographs or send your friends, that's pretty easy. Doing this or trying to make something representational, it takes a long time. So for me, what's interesting is that struggle of using this kind of really difficult material to kind of create something. I hope that struggle is kind of inherent within the work itself, and that adds that a layer of interest, right? So if something's really easy, I think it's easier to overlook it. Obviously, they're amazing digital artists, and there's a lot of great work today happening in photography and different media. But I'm really drawn to painting because of its kind of contradictions. It's difficult, it's messy, it's sloppy. It's both an object and an image. So I think like those dichotomies are really interesting for me to navigate as an artist. So let's see. Let's go to this one here. So to get back to talking about the home interior, right? The place of both safety and comfort, as well as vulnerability. I had a friend that I talked to about this body of work that I was doing years ago, and he said, "God, that's so boring." You know, I was looking at showing him the furniture catalog, and I said, "This is like why would someone be interested in doing this?" And he was interested in the fact that I was interested enough to spend lots of time and money on reproducing these images from commercial sources. So part of that is, I think, again, like this ongoing the painting and photography within those worlds. These artists from both medias have had like conversations and fights, right? So the history of painting, interior painting, from Vermeer, the Dutch 17th century artists, and up through today, has a lot of those tropes in the way the light falls, the way things are set up compositionally in a frame are taken from paintings. And photography has used that, and I don't say art photographers, but commercial photography within the catalog realm have used a lot of those things because they're really pleasing and we're kind of familiar. And so what I wanted to do with this series or with this body of work was try to pull back some of that territory back into painting from photography and especially from commercial photography. So, right, a crate and barrel catalog is not, it's there to be beautiful, but you don't cut it out and put it on the wall. It's there to sell you these products and to sell you this idea of the perfect home or this thing that, this idealized lifestyle that if you just have enough money, you can kind of purchase it, right? So that the initial impulse of this work is kind of to try to undermine that kind of commercial aspect or that very marketing kind of focused intention and bring it back into this space of more contemplation, of beauty, of maybe conflict. So I think that's, yeah. I mean, so my work navigates opposites. So there's a decorative impulse in the work that you'll see in, some of the patterns that I will enjoy. And that's kind of pushed against by areas of paint that are much more thickly applied, more loosely applied, sloppy, kind of messy, like unresolved. And so that's an important part of the work that I want to have come across. So let's head over to last two. So this idea of the interior of the home, right? Called Homemaker. I think it's a really great tutorial idea. So we like to consider the home is both an actual space, but it's a space of little created with our family, by a friend over. But it's also like a metaphor an interior space of like your mind. Like, so the interior of like what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, how those thoughts can get processed. So the most recent body of work I did was started in 2018, and part of it was response to stuff that was happening in politics, stuff that was happening in climate change, and also some personal things in my life. And so it was a feeling that where I felt like nothing that I took for granted, like family, government, educational structures, all these systems that I grew up thinking like, oh, this is pretty solid. Somebody's in charge and they know what they're doing. And I started to question that a lot in 2018. And so it was in that space of being just kind of unmoored and feeling anxious and feeling like, basically, you know, when I went home, you know, my wife and my kids made this like great, you know, space with our friends and stuff, but then it felt like the world was kept encroaching. And so a lot of these paintings are, I think, trying to capture that feeling of this interior space that's fairly solid, that's comfortable, that's kind of lovely, but you know, these forces from outside are kind of like hovering over, or they're punching through, or they're just fucking things up. Sorry. So that's kind of like, and I think after the pandemic, obviously that sense of maybe the home as an isolated place, the home as both a refuge, but as a place where you're getting even more like threat from the outside is embodied in, I think, some of the newer pieces here. So let's head to the last painting here. This is the most recent one. This one I mentioned earlier this year. And this was called Dark Matter. So this is also this idea of, like, as the title relate to kind of weather, or they relate to these kind of forces that I was talking about both like emotional reactions or interactions, but also there's just something in the painting that kind of generates the title, or as a kind of a nice metaphor or analogy for what I'm working. So the last thing I want to talk about is artistic influences. So, like most painters, I love painting. I can spend hours in museums. I've been so influenced, and my life has been like enlarged by painters throughout the years. So this body of work was started out with the Dutch painter Vermeer, and then it goes to, like, you know, other painters that painted interiors, to Robert Bechtel, who's a Bay Area artist who's actually still alive, amazing photorealistic big painter. But the other influence in this work are abstract expressionists, right? This group of artists in the 1950s. Jackson Pollock, everybody knows, like, watching paint, but I really love the early. It's probably one of my favorite abstract expressionists, and Philip Guston. And so their work is really about like the gesture, about what paint can do. Yeah. Sorry, repeat that last one. Philip Guston? Philip Guston, yeah. Philip, thank you. G-U-S-T-O-N. He's an amazing painter who also made a giant break in his career after he was known as being an abstract painter, did a lot of figures. But so again, like I feel like I'm always trying to resolve two things that are unresolvable in the work, like calm and beauty, and like roiling emotion and violence. You're trying to resolve, you know, representational, like painting with really abstract, painterly brushstroke and drippy kind of painting, and trying to reconcile this sense of like decoration and pattern with areas that are really kind of flat, right? So I'm really interested in how those things can not just fight with each other, but kind of work together to create a different, create a more holistic thing, right? So this idea of like that there's destruction in the way the paintings are made, right? Some things are obliterated, things are splashed, things are like messed up, and then they build back up. But ultimately, through potential destruction or a violent gesture, something beautiful. So the idea, I want there to be a potential transformation. So yeah, so that's it. I can talk for hours about painting, about my paintings, but I would love to hear what people have to say, if there's anything, especially as people thinking about pursuing a creative career. What that's like. It takes a long period of time to figure out what you're doing, and I still feel like there are many days that I'm in the studio and I still don't know what to do. But it's not about like knowing what's going to happen for me. It's about a moment of surprise or stepping back from a painting and kind of feeling like that doesn't feel like I did it. And that to me is like one of the coolest, most satisfying spaces that's created. Like you're doing this thing that's what we talked before about being in the flow state, and then this thing kind of emerges that is part of you, but it's also like, you know, maybe, I don't know, the inspiration or something's coming from elsewhere. So, questions? Or?
We talked earlier about your paintings and you asked me what I thought of them. This one is actually my favorite. You asked me what I thought of them, and I told you I thought that they would be peace. And you said that was surprising.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes you get responses like it's chaotic and it's intense. And as you were talking, I realized it occurred to me why it brings me peace. And it's because it's bringing the negative forces and the positive forces of life together as one is really what it's about, in my opinion. So that brings me peace. That brings me ease because it's closer to the truth. And that's why I appreciate you representing as an artist, representing both sides of life, and allowing that struggle to happen and presenting it for us. I appreciate it.
Wow. That's very, very articulate. I should have somebody write that down. Good. Good. I'm going to use that. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, anybody else?
We have a bunch of brand new makers with paint. It's the paint class with the in plastic, right?
No, we have class. I just left early to come here and stuff.
So,
Okay, yeah.
yeah, reflecting on the technique a little bit, which I mean, will really land on our ears. And like right now with our cabin class, we're having just so much color, so we're working with like colors that are far away first and then coming forward. And I'm wondering, when I look at yours, do you do the whole canvas a la the Coon abstract, you know, and then paint the representation, or do you really get going back and forth, the abstraction and representation all at the same time?
So it usually starts out with like a gesture, like this gesture in the background, and I start out with kind of a palette. But I kind of know where things are going to go. So things are kind of, but it's pretty, the beginning, literally I'm on the floor doing the Jackson Pollock thing, lifting it up, splashing. I mean, it's fun. It's like a dance. It's really,
Well, that's fun to point out too for makers, right? You do a lot of flat, and then you do a lot on the easel or the wall.
yeah. I usually, they're not stretched, so it's on the wall, and I like working against a hard surface. But there is a lot of back and forth. It's probably less. At a certain point, there's not a lot of like splashy like. There's less of this gesture as the painting develops. But there's, you know, like for instance, this area here was done fairly late over different. And you know, and there's lots of like techniques like where some painters do, like you might want to, if you want to keep an area really clean, but get really crazy and paint a little in there, you can mask it off and just do that. I don't really do that because I kind of like the bleed, and I like stuff like mixing into other areas so that it's. I like that being on the edge of losing control. This is like surfing or something, right? It's like you're riding it, and if you make a small adjustment, you can fall. But the joy of how long have you riding this thing?
Oh no, I was going to say, yeah, no, the bleeding effect you're doing, I haven't done it in years, so I'm back into it and enjoying it so much that it's going to be my major. It's like art class. But no, a lot of the techniques that you use, dry brushing, the bleeding effect, and stuff like that. Is that in your head when you're already standing, or is it more so because with me, it's more so in the moment thing? That's some parts I take from abstract impressionism is seeing what works, and if it doesn't, I just wipe it away and then move on type of thing. Is that kind of in your head as you're planning, or is it more of the in the moment type of situation?
Probably mostly in the moment. I mean, there are things that are planned for sure. And like you said, one of the great things about painting is that you can wipe stuff out and do it over. So there are different layers, and sometimes the mistakes are kind of create like a foundation, and that's again where an area where I think there's any painting I have here that kind of was something happened where it was surprising. But yeah, I would say have kind of a little bit of a plan, but what happens is that plan has to evolve, right? Like I don't get a color right in one area, and so the painting is a holistic thing, it's a gestalt. So if something's not working, then something else has to be adjusted, and often, a palette or something will have to be tweaked or adjusted, like different, like this weird orange thing is just the glaze, the kind of beige color under it was just dead. So I put the orange glaze on it and it kind of popped the way I wanted it to pop. So it's just, you try stuff out, and then that's the fun. Some painters are very meticulous and very planned, and they've got a process, and that's great, but that's not me.
Yeah, same way. I will make a couple of sketches, and then I'm like, okay, that didn't go the way I wanted to, and then we're just gonna work with it.
Yeah, it's all like building towards the same thing. So I don't feel like I've got a lot of terrible paintings at home. Trust me.
Grant tells us all the time to move on.
Yeah, you just do it and.
Hey, Mark, there's a question from the chat. So there's about 16 people in the chat, which is kind of cool.
Hi, Jeff.
in the Zoom. So the question was, how do you choose your color palette?
So the color palettes are chosen. I have a book of all these different palettes, and what I'm looking for usually is something that's like there are a lot of complementary palettes and palettes that might fight with each other a little bit, but I also want palettes that are not like typical, like I don't want like a fast food palette necessarily, or like a palette that so I guess that's not I'm not answering the question very well, but there's an intuitive sense of palettes. Like the one on the other side of this wall is a really light palette, and I like that because, and I chose that palette because it reminded me of like fragrance. It had a sense of like, so sometimes the palettes like that one specifically was related to kind of a sense of like what does this painting smell like? I guess it's like an idea I had of it.
That's awesome. I have a quick question too. I'm always curious about artists' daily practice. Are there certain times of day you work, or certain things you do every day, or like, do you have to have a cup of coffee? Like, what does your daily practice look like?
So I don't have a daily practice, okay, because I'm kind of a lazy artist. I work in fits and spurts. Probably my best time when I'm not working other jobs, which has always been a challenge, is like late afternoon into early evening, and a cup of coffee always helps. And I had a teacher in grad school that used to, she said like before she's painted, she had the practice of like sweeping her studio. So I sometimes I will do that. I will sweep the studio or kind of tidy up something just to like get a physical activity going with my body, and then that'll help me relax a little bit so I can get into the paintings. Also, these paintings, they all start with a projection. So there's a projection in the dark, and that's really interesting because I'm listening to music while I'm in the dark, looking at these images, and so that creates this really interesting space that's almost like feels like being almost like in an isolation tank or something. And I find that space in the dark, paints and music, to be really conducive to like shutting out everything else so I can just really focus.
That's interesting. So you put yourself in a bit of a prison and kind of escape.
That's good. That's good.
I find that very, and we do it all. We all do it one way or another, right? We don't realize we're doing it, but we do it in one way or another. But what a wonderful creative way to do it. And your profit.
It's a nice prison, comfortable, it's a nice prison. The prison, right? That side, it's good to spend time there.
Yeah, it's controlled.
Yeah.
and know how to work. And that's a really good lesson for other artists. Yeah, thank you.
Another good insight.
I'm just beating you back.
Good, like, oh, yeah. Harder than I.
Yeah. Are there any more questions from the group here at the gallery? I think there's one more from the chat.
Tim asks, I haven't saw any paintworks yet that impose negative emotions, although were mentioned. Do you inherently see the home space in positive connotation?
Could you repeat the question?
So Tim says,
Do you inherently see the home space in positive connotation?
I do. I mean, my home space is but I know that not everybody does. And I don't always feel positive in my home. So that's, paintings are working through some of those issues. And again, like I mean, nothing could just be all positive. Like there has to be like a shadow to light.
Right.
I think what Kendrick was saying is that I think I want both things to be in the paintings because that seems real to me, and it seems like the paintings are a way for me to work out those. Again, the negative stuff is probably more interior than specifically in my home, in my house. So that's There's always like voices and stuff going on in my head, and that's being worked out, on the canvas. It's cheaper than paying a therapist.
are there any other questions or comments?
I'm here, so
I have one question. I like the way you talked about, the sort of chaos with the superimposition of the order of a room. And this one seems to have more chaos than some of the others. How do you create a balance with that?
that's interesting. I don't know. I kind of feel like each painting is its own entity in a way, and some I think do well with more chaos maybe, and some less. Although I do have to say, over the last number of years, I've done some paintings that have felt very kind of flat to me, and usually they're the ones without enough chaos. They're the ones where things seem a little too static. So I think maybe I'm edging into
Chaos.
chaos is not it. Thank you for that question. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark.